Welcome back to the FW Word. Week number 2. Chance to look at a topic from history, the modern world, or current affairs without shying away from the controversial. The old green screen's having a few issues today. Apologies. So whether you're watching on Twitch or after the fact on YouTube, your views are what makes the show, so get involved, make yourselves heard. The rules for the discussion down below. But let's be clear, this isn't a chance to put your view ahead of everyone else's or beat people down with it. Be respectful. Understand that people might have a different opinion, and be ready to put your views across without attacking anyone else. As host, my aim is to bring all sides into view, and avoid telling you what to think. That's up to you. We'll start with a brief introduction on today's topic, and then we'll explore it from a variety of angles. If you're watching live, and you put forward an interesting question or topic, it could be selected to appear on the screen over there. Universal basic income. Should we all get it? Could we all get it? What's the deal? So it used to be known as social dividend. It's an amount of guaranteed unconditional money, basically, for everybody in the country. Sounds good, right? Well, Hernator, welcome to the live chat. UBI might be limited by age, say 16 or over, or maybe other conditions like, if you're in prison, you don't get any. But basically, everybody in the country gets a certain amount of money, the same amount of money as everybody else, for doing nothing, just for existing. It's definitely a form of socialism. Your first reaction might be, why should anyone get stuff for free? Especially if you work for a living. It doesn't mean that nobody has to work. Right? We're not talking about that level of income. It's likely to be quite low for every person. So there's still an incentive to go out and work so you can earn even more, But here's the thing. Under the current system, consider you might be working right now. Might have a job. Let's say, for the sake of argument, you earn $30,000 a year, right? Your friend might be living on state benefits, yeah? Not working. Getting, for whatever reason, could be a good reason, could be a bad reason, getting $10,000 a year, yeah? So, if you look at it like that, currently, your friend's getting $10,000 for free. But you get more money. But you're working. Right? So you're tied to this job. If you leave the job, you stop getting the money. He doesn't do anything. For whatever reason, he gets the benefits. Consider under universal basic income. You would then perhaps get $10,000 a year each, yeah? Your friend still gets $10,000 a year, although instead of being the state benefits, it would be universal basic income. And then you would be on your $30,000 plus the $10,000, yeah? So you'd be on $40,000. So you'd basically get a benefit out of it as well. That's the deal. There's usually no obligations to actually take universal basic income, if you don't want it. Honcho, thank you for the host. Much appreciated. You could potentially decline to accept it. It's not a kind of, you have to have this money no matter what. Or if you took it, you could just give it to charity, So, for anyone who's thinking, I haven't earned this, I don't want it, I don't need it. Yeah, fine. Okay, don't take it. Or give it away. The charity. It's not a, you must take this money, no matter what. So, there's benefits to a system like this, and there's some drawbacks. Let's have a look at the benefits. So, in the UK, the system around money from the government is complicated. Some people are eligible for tax credits. So it's money deducted from the tax bill. Yeah? some people are eligible for just straight up benefits. Just the money comes from the government into your pocket for whatever reason. Some people are eligible for both. And there's so many different types. There's a whole load of different reasons you could get a tax credit, or you could get a benefit. And the same in other countries. It is a complicated system. Mulhernator says, I think universal basic income currently isn't really required in the UK, but automation of the workforce is going to result in an ever-dwindling labour market. Is it? Interesting. You successfully preempted a topic we're going to be coming on to later in the show. Thanks for your input. And we'll definitely come back to that one in a little bit. So the result is that we have a complicated tax system and a benefit system. So we need a workforce to make sure that everyone's getting the right amount, to make sure that the amounts are fair, and to administer everything, to keep fraud to a minimum, right? All of these people need paying, so the government pays these people so that they can keep things in order. The more complicated the system, the more likely there are to be loopholes. And we've all heard about tax loopholes. The rich not having to pay tax on certain things, certain big corporations not having to pay tax because of, reasons. And the economies of these countries miss out. The economy of Ireland was, for a long time, missing out on companies like Amazon, which isn't the only one, by any means, moving in and then getting out of paying a lot of tax. And the more complicated a system is, the easier it is, arguably, to defraud. There certainly are people out there who cheat the system. I'm not saying there's a lot, but they do exist. So people find it harder, hopefully, to defraud the system if it's simple. So under universal basic income, the system's incredibly simple, right? Every single person gets a set amount of money, the same amount of money as everybody else. No questions asked. It's not, oh, I'm disabled, but I'm not quite disabled enough to qualify for this benefit, or whatever, It's very simple. You get money, I get money, everyone gets the same amount of money, Mulhernator says, I think Ireland deliberately sets low tax rates. It can benefit a country to set low business taxes so more businesses move there. Yeah, certainly that is the case. That is the case in Ireland. My point was more down to the loopholes that exist in the system, which allow companies to be registered in one place and do business somewhere else, subject to different tax laws than the country where they're actually doing the business, You can't blame the companies for doing this, because if it was down to me running a company, I'd want to make as much money as possible. I want to pay people as much money as possible, but I would still want to be in business. If the competition got to the stage where I couldn't compete and I could pay less tax through a loophole, then of course I would. A lot of these big businesses do this, such as Facebook's new European server center. Another example of a large business venture, I suppose, being set up in Ireland. It's from Mulhernator as well. Okay, so that's one benefit. Universal basic income. We can simplify the system. Okay, if you've got a simpler system, you don't need to pay as many people to administer that system. Could save a lot of money. All these people who are, tax investigators, auditors, and all the kind of everything associated with that level of government would be incredibly simple. It would just be, here's some money, that's your money. So when I said tax, I meant tax credits, specifically tax credits and benefits. Just don't mention to the Irish that the Brits own Guinness, says Mulhernator. I'll keep that one quiet. Unless you're watching on YouTube right now and happen to be Irish, in which case your cover's blown, Mulhernator. Sorry. So, second benefit, education. Right? It'd be easier to pay for. In the UK, if you want a university level education, it's usually around £9,000 a year in fees. And most students will take on a debt to cover that. Excuse me a moment. So, not just university education. It could be a smaller training course, you know? You might want to train yourself up so you can get a better job or make a career change. Yeah? It would be easier to pay for if you have universal basic income, because you could put that money towards education. I know a lot of students end up in quite a bit of debt, and it isn't quite the same as taking out a bank loan. It is more akin to a kind of... I mean, you have to pay it back, but the terms on paying back student debt are very, very lenient compared to the way that you borrow money from a bank, for example. But that money is still outstanding. Up to £30,000 if you do 3 years of university education. Repaying it is essentially a tax, says Mulhernator. Yeah. Only the thing is, it's not really a tax because you owe it. Because you wouldn't have gone to university unless somebody paid for it, and that somebody happened to be the student loan company, which is funded by the government, I believe. Written off when you hit 50 in the UK, apparently, says Mulhernator. 7% of your income above 21,000. Yeah. I guess, but then you add this into 20% income tax, and then you've got to pay national insurance contributions, which is like Social Security in America, and then you've got to pay your 7%. So that's getting on for 40% of your income, probably. That's if you're quite a low earner. Much higher if you earn a lot more money. But that's all to pay. You know, £30,000 might take quite a long time to pay back. I'm being attacked by a dog. It's my dog. Just in case that wasn't clear. Go on the sofa. Go on. Go on. Good. That's a good boy. Yeah, okay. So, imagine that you had enough money from universal basic income to essentially pay for your university qualification or pay for most of it. Because, let's face it, like if you have a part-time job and you're studying for a degree, it's unlikely you're going to be able to do enough hours to earn £9,000 a year to pay your fees. The more likely outcome is that you take a loan for the university fees, and then you have a part-time job to pay for other things, like nefariously going out and partaking in debauchery, which is a common university practice, or, you know, buying food. That works as well. Education's a foundation, in my opinion. I'll try and keep my opinions to a minimum here. It's a foundation of a fair and productive society, okay? Raising the overall level of education of a population can only be a good thing, assuming you can do it without financial crisis or misguided education. Such as, you know, for example, eugenics during the Second World War. Morally questionable today, but it was quite well accepted at the time. Assuming all of those things, the more educated people are in general, the easier we'll find it and the better we'll get along. Again, in my opinion. If that was the debauchery comment, Mulhernator says, if that was a subtle dig at me, I spent the day walking and finding wildlife. You know, I've been known to refer to the opposite sex as wildlife during my time at university. Not proud of it, but you know, if that's what you mean, then fair enough. Yeah. Double entendre. Before we move on to the third thing, actually, let's just finish off with the benefits of universal basic income relating to education. Ideally, people would educate themselves after finishing school, right? So you do whatever qualifications you're going to do. Personally, I'm not saying I'm a saint or anything, but I educate myself all the time, you know. I read, mainly science books. It's really, really sad. But I watch educational shows and I read lots of science journal things online because that's what I'm interested in, you know? All of those things are free, or in the case of books, they're reasonably inexpensive. The rate I read quite slowly. It doesn't take too much money to read a book very slowly. The issue with that is that you can't rely on everybody in society to continually educate themselves. I know very little about certain subjects, you know. I don't have a general self-education. After school, I chose the subjects I wanted to learn about, and I continue to learn about history, politics, and science, you know. I know very little about economics. I know very little about even some sciences like zoology, for example. I know very little about that. So it's not like my education is covering everything. You might find that free education is, or casual education, I like to think of it, is less informative, a lower quality than formal education. So some employers might require you to have an actual qualification, you know. Oh, I read a book about being a doctor and now I want to be a doctor. Well, that's not good enough, you know. You need a medical degree, yeah. You need to go on a training course. You can't just read a book about being a pilot and then be a pilot. You need a flight training course. And the same with a lawyer. You have to pass a bar exam, and that takes a lot of research and a lot of learning. So certain jobs, you know, you need these qualifications for. But that's where universal basic income could potentially come in. And for those people unwilling otherwise to spend time just learning, which not everyone wants to do, you know, fair enough. But if they had the money to do it, they might consider being taught by somebody. That's education. Let's talk a bit about poverty. So, poverty could be reduced or eliminated with a universal basic income, right? So people who currently have nearly zero income, they'd have a minimum level. They have the same money coming in from universal basic income as everybody else. And that might just be enough to house and feed those people. So, okay. No one likes to think of themselves in a situation, but imagine you're homeless right now. You're home. You wouldn't be watching me on the internet if you're homeless, probably. But imagine you're homeless right now and you have no job, yeah? What would you do? What would be the first thing that you would do in that situation? Answers in live chat, if you don't mind. Let's see what you've got to say. It's not something we want to think about as a society very much, unless we've been in that situation or know somebody who has. Let's see what Slice comes up with. And Mahonesa. And anyone else in live chat. You're kind of screwed, in a way, says Mahonesa. He's going to go on to explain more in just a moment. So there's a number of reasons why. We won't go into homelessness in great detail. It's not really the subject of the show. But there's a number of reasons why this comes about. Just make food, water, and healthcare free, so no one ever has to work, says Slice. Everyone can be as lazy as hell. That's an interesting opinion. But question for Slice then is, someone's got to. You can't just have free food. Someone has to pay for it. It might not be you, but somebody has to pay for it. So who, in that situation, who would pay for that? And Mulhonator says, and in this country, unless you get help, it's hard to apply for jobs and benefits without a permanent address. He's nailed it right on the head. So you have to take the first step to get out of a situation where you're homeless. You'd have to get a job. You can't have an address without some means of paying for it. So you can't rent a property. Normally, you would need to give a deposit. You might be able to stay with a friend. That might help. But you'd have to have some friends. Maybe you don't, you know. If you don't have an address, what employer is going to take you on? How are you going to get an address unless you have a job? you know? That is kind of the situation that you'd find yourself in. Why have money at all, says Slice? Nobody has to pay anything. Well, okay. But then in that situation, okay, let's take for example, you want to have an electric guitar. Someone's got to spend time making that. You can't do it because for whatever reason you don't have the materials to, you don't have the wood, you don't have the metal for the strings. Someone's got to make all those components and put them together and then give that to you. So what's the incentive to do that for free? That would be my question to Slice. Nobody would have to pay anything, but why would I, as a guitar maker, just give my guitars away for free? Surely I'd want something in return for that, right? Interesting question, though. So, universal basic income, the idea is that it would enable you to have somewhere to live and overcome the first step. So, you don't have to tell your employer that you don't have a permanent address. And hopefully it will get you into work. Or maybe you don't have to work. Maybe the universal basic income is high enough that if you wanted, you could just pay for accommodation and food. Basic accommodation, basic food, but you would have enough to survive, you know? Why play terrible instruments like the guitar, says Malhernator, when you can play majestic instruments like the lute? Party like it's 15.99. Hey, Adrian Vaughan, welcome to the live chat. Nice to see you again. I've never heard Malhernator play the lute even, so I wouldn't know. So that's number 3 on the list of benefits. And we're coming on to the criticisms as well. You know, I'm going to give you a measured debate. We'll just get the benefits out of the way first. Slice says people with an income source who can get by on that income source often have no incentive to work or get a better job. It's a very good point that Slice has made. And that is something that we are going to come on to a little bit later on in the show. So if you make a great comment and I call it out, but we're going to talk about it later, I'm not going to answer it right now. We're going to wait until we get to that part of the show. But good point. Very valid point. Having children. Okay, let's talk about having children. So, in a purely selfish sense, if I'm an employer, I don't want my staff having children. Yeah? If I employ a woman who then gets pregnant, and they are in the UK, the legal minimum is 52 weeks of leave. 52 weeks, that's a year. So I have to give this person a year off work, and they still have to be paid. I can't just get rid of them. I'm not allowed to just fire them because they're pregnant. That's clearly not a fair system. But you can't just say to people, you're not allowed to have children. It's a human right, to reproduce, surely. But you can see the dilemma for employers because, why would you take on even a man, because the paternity in the UK at least can be split. The maternity, the leave can be split between mother and father. It could be 26 weeks each, or it could be any combination. But as an employer, I can't see why I'd want that to happen, because I'm paying for you to be at home. And I'm sure you're having a hard time. I'm not saying raising kids is easy, but raising kids is not doing work for me as the employer, So what is this basic income supposed to cover, says Slice? If it's not enough to feed and house me, what's the point? So what we're doing here is we're going to assume that it's going to be the minimum amount that are required to get a basic place to live and buy basic food for a year. Well, for forever, but let's say you get it monthly or annually. So Timmy's says, well said. Welcome to... Oh, Timsies. It's Timsies, not Timmy's. Apologies, in the live chat. Let's assume that it is enough to feed and house you, but you're not going to be living, have like gold toilets and stuff like that. You're just going to be living in a really basic place. And you're going to be eating fairly basic food. And you're going to have no money for kind of luxuries or anything like that. So this is a problem in the current society, is that supposing, and there's nothing to stop, supposing you run a small company and you employ 3 women and 3 men in your company as the boss, and just through some sheer coincidence, all 3 women become pregnant at the same time. I'm not saying anyone in particular is responsible for that, but let's just say that happens, okay? You've halved your workforce, and you still have to pay for those people, but they're doing no work for you. You know? Who's paying for my free income? Another great question from Slice. Every other hard-working schmuck. Well, that's something we're going to get onto as well, so I'll come back to that one. We're on the benefits for the moment. So that's a problem. But with universal basic income, if the woman, or if the man takes the leave when you have a child, if the employer was then able to not pay you because you're not doing any work, you're at home looking after a child, and you use the universal basic income instead, wouldn't that be a better system? You know, possibly not. Tax the robots; they don't need the money. Says Mulhernator. They have to earn the money. Who's paying robots in order for them to be taxed? Alright, more stimulation for the economy is an argument for universal basic income. And we are going to get onto the against arguments, don't worry. Suppose that you're working and you earn $30,000 a year, okay? You can afford to rent a place to live, you can afford to buy all your food, you can afford to pay all your bills, but you don't have a lot left for buying consumer goods. You know, you can't afford an Xbox One because that's just outside your price range, and you can't go out and spend $200 a night on parties and restaurants and you know, whatever else you might want to spend your money on. You don't have anything left over. If you were granted an extra, for example, $10,000 a year, you might be able to use that to spend more freely. And what that does is it puts more money in businesses. So the place that sold you the Xbox, the place that sold you that nice Italian meal that you went out for, and all those beers that you didn't need to drink. Didn't have to drink those beers, but you did because you wanted to drink the beers, damn it, and you had the money for it, right? Stimulates growth. Those businesses stay open. They might be able to grow on the basis of the profits they make from you, employ more people. Yeah? So you might be able to get a better job. Or people without a job might be able to get one. Dragon Warrior 34, welcome to the live chat. And Afira is here as well, wow. Hello, welcome. I had to have mandatory 6 weeks unpaid, says Afira, for pregnancy. Okay, so it works slightly differently in America then. That's how it works in the US. You don't work, you don't get paid. I had 2 days off unpaid, says Slice, with each of my kids. 2 days. Wow. Free food and a free place to live, effectively, says Slice. The food industry and the housing industry would benefit. Interesting. Slice says, if I lived with mum or dad, I could use my income to buy an Xbox. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's what we'll come on to. Bonus pay for leisure, says Timsies. Yeah, so that's what we're on about now. We will get onto the downsides. Or just drink 24/7 and be a vagrant. Yeah, that's another option. And more dubiously, the final benefit is the concept of freedom. Okay? We've all heard America, land of the free, etc. Big on freedom. There are certain people, supporters of personal freedom, that advocate that people should be free to decide what they do. If there's only a limited supply of jobs, and some of you out there will have experienced this, you're not really choosing your job. Yeah? You are choosing to apply because the alternative is not working. There is this one job that you've been offered that you must take. Yeah? It's kind of like wage slavery. It's like you either work or you don't work. You don't have a choice about where to work. You don't have a choice about how much income you get. You just have to go out and do this one job. If there's only a limited supply of jobs, you might be taking a less than satisfactory job or go without money. And this is a key concept. It might diminish your ability to say no. Some people advocate that in a free society, you should be free to say no. I don't want to do that work. I want to do this work. You know? It's an interesting point. Timsy says, this is not like government housing in a way, where people who have kids end up getting the houses over those people who have had to work their whole lives. So, it's a consistent argument with housing benefits and things like that. This is, so in Timsy's example, let's suppose Timsy has been working his whole life, and some woman somewhere with 8 kids gets a free house, doesn't have to work, because she's looking after kids all day. The government pays for her house. This would be like, she gets her house paid for, but you get that same amount of money as well. And you're working, but you still get the money. So that's just why it's universal basic income. It is, the whole freedom argument's an interesting one. So, it ties in with the advancement of society. Okay, so, advancement of science, advancement of technology. We cure new diseases. We invent new things that make our lives easier. Smartphones, things like that. I don't know, whatever the thing is that comes after smartphones. Might be aided more with personal freedoms. You might spend your universal basic income, supposing that you volunteer and you visit a poverty-stricken area. You use your universal basic income to pay for the flights and to pay for supplies that you might need. And you take them out there and you just help people, you know? So those people in poverty benefit from your universal basic income. Otherwise, you'd have to pay for that out of your own money, and you're that guy or woman who's on $30,000 a year, can't really afford to do that. Or you might work on science projects in your spare time. You might come up with a technological breakthrough in your basement. You might just work on music or art or literature, any of which could benefit society, you know? Those are the main benefits of universal basic income the way it's been laid out. We'll talk about criticisms in a minute, but let's catch up with the chat. Slice says, I don't even have a high school diploma and my current wages are comparable to some doctors' wages. There's very limited job availability here. Busted my ass and got where I am by working hard. Crappy jobs my whole life. Yeah, that's not a good situation to be in. So would your circumstances have changed if you had a set, let's call it $10,000 a year for the sake of argument. If you just got $10,000 a year for doing nothing, would your situation be different now, Slice? That's the question. If we were all given extra money, said Timsies, would it not cause prices of almost everything to change, almost making it useless in a way? That's a very good point. So what Timsy's getting at here is prices are affected by supply and demand. It's basic economics. If there's not very much of something and lots of people want it, it costs more. Because you can see that you can charge more for it and people still buy it. So if people have more money in their pocket, won't it cause prices to go up? Because people selling items know that there's lots of disposable income around. And I don't think that's true. In that situation, I don't think that's true, but you might disagree. Because there's still competition, isn't there? Let's suppose I sell pineapples, right? I charge $1 for a pineapple. And it costs me 98 cents to get that pineapple. So I make 2 cents on every pineapple that I sell. I could just raise the price, couldn't I? I know lots of people have got more money, so I could charge $2 a pineapple. But what about all these other 3 people selling pineapples at $1 each? Why would anyone... even if I have twice as much money as I had before... Hey, thanks for the follow, Timsies. Much appreciated. So the question is, if I'm selling pineapples at $2 each, and all these other people are selling them at $1 each, why would anyone buy the $2 pineapple, you know? Just because lots of people have money in their pocket doesn't mean they're willing to throw it away. I don't think. I don't think. Not something I've researched personally, but that's my gut feeling, at least. If I had $10,000 a year, says Slice, between me and my wife, we would survive or raise our kids. We'd never need to work. So what happens with minimum wage increases? We survived on less, says Zafira. And Slice says that's when you have private meetings with the other pineapple sellers and agree to jack the price up. Well, yes, that is certainly a possibility. I mean, you could make a pineapple cartel. What's to stop you? I don't know. It also depends on the quality of how the pineapple's processed. We're getting too much into the pineapple stuff. Let's move on a little bit. Some criticisms of universal basic income then. There is a suggestion of those who get money without working are less likely to want to work. I think Slice has just proved this. He wouldn't have to work. If he could just get universal basic income and his wife could get universal basic income, they would stop working and just look after their kids. The exact amount is open to debate. How many people would stop working is open to debate. But if the number of people in the workforce drops, it could mean that businesses might lose out. So production lowers, there's not enough people doing those jobs, so we can't make as many things. This is going to be, or the alternative is we're going to lower wages for everybody because we can't sell as many things. It might be bad for the economy. So it might mean that there's a shortfall in pineapples, you know. There's not enough pineapples to go around, as an example, seeing as we're on the subject of pineapple. Why did I pick pineapples? Anyway, there's not enough pineapples to go around, so it's going to cause inflation in the cost of pineapples. Or anything else. The cost is going to go up. It would take a large shift in the workforce. Lots and lots and lots of people quitting their jobs and just living on universal basic income for that to be the case. But is that a possibility? Could be. There's this weird human phenomenon, says Slice, where if something's more expensive, it's automatically better. Yeah, that is true, isn't it? Yeah, like the whole iPhone thing. Like the a top of the range iPhone 7 will cost you $800, you know. You can buy a phone for $200. People want the $800 one. Anyway, we're getting slightly off the point. Okay, so will it cause people to drop out of the workforce? Will people be like Slice? What about you? If you're not Slice in a live chat, if you're working right now, and I said to you, you can have enough money to live a basic lifestyle, so you can eat and you can live, but that's about it. You don't have any money to go out. You'd have to get a job for that. Would you take the money, or would you continue with the job? That's my question to you. It's a very informal survey, but let's do it. There's also the question of how people might spend their universal basic income, let's say in an unwise fashion. Booze, drugs, that kind of stuff, you know? Americans would be more familiar with this, probably, but there was something called the temperance movement in the United States in the run-up to Prohibition, which generated the 18th Amendment prohibiting basically the production of alcoholic drinks anyway. It came about because there was a drinking problem, or there was seen to be a drinking problem in the United States in the late 19th century. So, between 1900, the dawn of the 20th century, and 1913, prior to the First World War, beer production in the United States went from 1.2 billion gallons to 2 billion gallons in 13 years. And average alcohol consumption per person increased by a third in just 13 years. So, under the right circumstances, it's certainly possible for a society to swing more towards alcoholism, which might suggest that, under the right circumstances, people given effectively free money, universal basic income, It's not quite free money, but we'll get onto that. Could all use it to buy booze. There was a very specific set of circumstances leading up to Prohibition. We're unlikely to see those circumstances again. We'd have to go into detail on late 19th century American history and politics, I suppose, to cover that in more detail. But it's unlikely to happen, I think. I'm not saying it can't happen. Maybe if you give people universal basic income, they go out and blow it on a load of crap. I don't know. I'd continue with a job, says Dragon Warrior. I would go insane not having to go outside and get cabin fever. Already have cabin fever for not having a job for 3 months now. Wow, okay. So there is that. There's a sense of purpose, isn't there? A sense of direction that having a job would give you. I'm not saying that everybody needs that sense of direction or would find it useful. Plenty of people would just spend their time doing what they consider to be productive without having a job. Timsy says, the work I do now only gets me basic living. So yes, the money would help for sure. So Timsies would hold on to his job and use the extra money to be more comfortable, I suppose, to live more comfortably. Fair enough. This chat is great. Most of your work motivation for working is eating and shelter. If you've got that covered, why bother? Says Slice. It's a fair point, and one worth considering, I think. There's also the question of where the money comes from. So this has been raised a number of times in chat already. Thank you for raising that. I'm actually going to put this one on the screen as well, because that one's worth having. If you have any comments that are worth raising formally on the screen, I will put them up there for sure. There's no guarantee, but we'll see what we can do. Where does the money come from to fund universal basic income? The government can't just magic money out of nowhere. There was a suggestion in the 18th century that the government just print money to do that. That's such a bad idea. This is such a bad idea. Like, economically, never print money. I mean, print some money, but like, generally don't print money to solve problems. So what they were suggesting was to just constantly print more and more money and just give it to people. That is a ticket to rampant inflation. It's happened a number of times in our history. Pre-Second World War Germany, Zimbabwe, lots of places have had this conundrum. You can't print money to solve problems. So where does it come from? Usually, universal basic income advocates will tell you that income tax would need to go up. So we need to raise the income tax for working people in order to raise the money to fund universal basic income. It could be quite sharp. And critics of universal basic income are keen to point out that wherever the money comes from, it's not going to pay for itself. You're essentially giving out free money. People aren't all going to use that money to put back into the economy. Some people might use it, put it into underground sources. Some people might save it. If everybody instantly saved all of their universal basic income, it effectively comes out of the economy. No one's spending it. So those are the main criticisms. So, interestingly, at this stage, what do you think? What do you think? Could we fund universal basic income? Could we fund it to the level where we could provide everybody with what they need to get basic accommodation and food? Is that possible? Would you want that for everybody? Not just for yourself, but you're not the only one who can get it. That's why it's universal. Everybody has to have it in your country. That's what we're talking about here. Is that something that could feasibly work in your country? If not, why not? And if it can work, should we do it? Would overall the benefits of doing it outweigh all the drawbacks? If you said to your hardworking mates, we'll give everyone free money, but you now have to pay twice as much in tax, would you do that? Would your mates do that? have a think about that. What I'm going to do is take a 5-minute break. I'm going to come back and talk a little bit more about some of the factors that might change your opinion. So, answers in chat, and I'll come back in 5 minutes and we'll talk about universal basic income. If you're watching the recorded version on YouTube, it's time to turn over the tape and switch to part 2.